Hey guys, so today I wanted to try something different, and so I'll be comparing two of my favorite Claymore users in the game, and that is Razor and Diluc, and discuss some of their strengths, their weaknesses, and my overall opinions on them. Hope you enjoy. So to start, let's talk about their role in the party. They both act as the main DPS, who is the person that will deal the majority of the damage. However, the way in which they deal damage is vastly different. Where Razor focuses on dealing physical damage through his auto attacks, Diluc instead focuses more on reactions for his damage. And so let's talk about Diluc a bit more. Diluc is the king of reactions, as with his elemental skill, is able to easily trigger not only melt reactions but also vaporize. And in the case of vaporize, is able to trigger it multiple times, which makes his burst damage insane, as long as you can keep the enemy with the Hydro status, and is the main reason you always see him paired with Shinshu. Whereas compared to Razor, Razor is an electric character which sadly has some of the worst reactions in the game, and is a big reason Razor often gets outclassed towards the late game, as the only electric reaction that really benefits him is Superconduct. And Superconduct by itself doesn't do too much damage, and instead helps him deal more damage with his attacks, and ultimately performs a lot worse than Pyro reactions, especially towards the late game where reactions are very important and where many of the meta teams focuses on characters that can trigger such reactions. Also, another great thing about the Pyro element is the elemental resonance, which boosts the party's attack by 25%, which is huge and a lot better than the electric one, which only gives you more energy. So in terms of reactions, Diluc definitely has the upper hand here. However, as I mentioned before, Razor does not really rely on reactions, and instead most of his damage comes from his attacks, which does mean that while he doesn't have that high burst potential of Diluc, he does have an overall consistency with his DPS as long as he can keep up his elemental burst. Which is the best and worst thing about Razor, in that while he has his burst up, he's pulling crazy numbers and dealing a ton of damage. However, while out of his elemental burst form, he is sort of like a fish out of water that can only really auto attack and wait until his next elemental burst is up. And because he is so reliant on this burst, he is often required to spend a majority of the battle on the field gathering energy and attacking, whereas Diluc, because a lot of his damage comes from his reactions, he is often changing characters and triggering reactions, and overall is a lot more interactive than Razor, which I quite like. Now, I've talked a bit about Razor's burst, so let's talk about Diluc's burst. Oh man, this burst is amazing. Not only is it amazing visually, having the flaming phoenix appear and melt your enemies away, but the damage it can output is huge, especially with a vaporized reaction. Now the good thing about this burst is that after you activate it, you are free to switch characters, whereas again with Razor's burst you have to stay on the field in order to maximize that damage with the burst. Also, due to the low cost of this burst being only 40 energy required, which is half of Razor's burst costing 80 energy, you'll be able to use this burst a lot in the fights you use them in. So in terms of bursts, I would say Diluc is a lot more flexible, allowing him to change characters if needed and not being forced to stay on the field like Razor's. He can also deal some incredible damage, and so I would give the advantage to Diluc. Moving on, one thing I like to bring up is his stats. So obviously, because Diluc's a 5-star, he's going to have better stats towards the max Ascension rank, having over 100 attack more than Razor. But the real great thing about Diluc is that he gains crit rate on each of his Ascension ranks. This is huge, as at the max rank you're going to have about 20% crit rate, meaning that most of his artifacts you can instead focus more on crit damage, which helps a lot. Razor instead gains physical damage per Ascension rank, which is alright as Razor relies a lot on that. However, it's nowhere near as good as crit rate, especially again towards the late game where physical damage just falls off quite a bit. Although in saying that, there are rumours of a physical damage buff which could help physical damage dealers like Razor become more viable towards the late game. In saying that, I think that currently I would give the edge towards Diluc, mainly due to him gaining crit rate, which is very important. Moving on, let's talk about the weapons. They are both very similar in that the best in slot weapon is the Wolf's Gravestone, which is good as it means that you can easily switch out and try out both characters if you want to. Also, even if you don't have the Wolf's Gravestone, a 4-star weapon will do just fine, like the prototype Archaic, and so they are pretty even in weapons, and neither one requires too much investment to be good. The artifacts they use are quite different though, with the best in slot for Diluc being the Crimson Witch of Flames, and for Razor he has a few options, but the best is the 2-piece Pale Flame set alongside with the 2-piece Bloodstain for huge damage on his physical attacks, although he can definitely run the 4-piece Glad set and do fine. And so in terms of which one requires more investment, I would probably say Razor, as if you go for the Gladiator set you'll need to farm the bosses, which are 40 resin just to get a drop, as well as if you farm the Pale Flame set and Bloodstain you'll need to be farming 2 different domains, both of which have 2 different artifacts set they can drop, which means it will take a lot longer to get a decent gear set compared to Diluc. The only negative about farming for Diluc set is the domain. It is really annoying with the Pyro Mages, unless you have someone like Ganyu who can easily clear it. Last thing I want to bring up is the fact that firstly Diluc is the 5-star character, meaning that in order to get his constellation it's going to be quite pricey, especially as he has never appeared in a featured banner, whereas Razor is a 4-star and does appear every now and then on the featured banner, which will greatly help him get into C6. And so I'll definitely choose Razor as the one who's more free to play friendly. And so to wrap this up, Diluc is a powerful character who, due to him being a pyro character, has access to some of the best reactions in the game, a strong elemental resonance, as well as having strong base stats and requiring a less investment for his artifacts, whereas Razor, while having slightly weaker reactions, does benefit in being a 4-star character who can gain constellations very fast. And so if I were to say which one is better, I would say it would be Diluc. However, again, at the end of the day, the most important thing is to have fun, and so I'd play either one you enjoy. And so I hope you enjoyed, and see you next time.